Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I am going to be talking about Utopia Season 1, Episode 3. It's called Tuesday's Child, so full spoilers for the episode as always. And we pick up from the huge, shocking ending of Episode 2. And I asked last episode, I said, can they keep this up? Can they keep throwing in these interesting twists and reveals or big hooking moments at the end of each episode? And to an extent, I think they kind of still did that. It's definitely the least exciting of the three episodes in the sense that it's a lot more predictable. The end of this episode, which reveals that Arby is working for John Cusack's character, Dr. Christie, whose name I'm trying to remember now. Because last episode I was like, Rainn Wilson, John Cusack. It's almost really easy to not even bother learning their names when it's an actor, because you just say the actor. But revealing that he's working for him and seems to even maybe be his son, given that he did the whole dinner table thing with him. What did you do to earn your place in this crowded world speech? He did, does that with him. He hugs him. So I'm thinking the weird child, but it's not as exciting as the shocking ending of last episode or the first episode's Jessica Hyde reveal. So it definitely pales a little bit in that sense. That's not to say that I'm down in the episode. I think the episode's actually really good, and it kind of solidified how much I'm into this show. Even though I do think it's probably the weakest of the three. Mainly, I think the Artemis stuff, where Jessica goes to find Artemis, who is a character in the story of the comic, but as a real person, the person who taught her to fight, and taught her to fight is the way she does. And we see maybe some of the best examples of that in this episode early on with a pair of assassins who I was referring to in my head simply as the Gingers. A pair of ginger twins just appear out of a bush and attack Wilson and Ian whilst Jessica and Becky are in at the funeral of the woman who was selling the comic, try to get some intel. And so I was just laughing at the visual of these two gingers stepping out of just coming out of this giant hedge, and then coming up and asking kind of similar questions, presumably from the same place. But we have Jessica come out, and the action scene here is quite good, where we see a moment of where Becca tries to like tell her to be nice, but it almost gets Jessica killed. And I actually thought she was going to get mad at her for it and like really retaliate, and it doesn't quite happen. But I think that scene of the others maybe getting in her way, which is again happens again at the end of the episode, where she's trying to kill Artemis, who we'll get to the details of why, but Ian kind of tries to stop her there as well. And again, she has to push him out of the way and deal with them as kind of these extra parties who are trying to stop her from being such a murdering person. That's a weird sense. But the body of Sam is just lying there in the house, and they have to leave it at the start, and then later on it's still there. I thought it was quite notable that there's a moment where Wilson, even though obviously he's really upset about his eye, he's made himself a little eye patch out of the Frosties box, or Frosted Flakes, as the US would call them, and he's got Tony the Tiger on his eye. And he even says like, "Hey, we're actually in the conspiracy now. Isn't that kind of cool?" And him and Becky kind of like smile about it. And I was thinking as he was saying that, dude, you saw like one of your new friends shot dead like last night. Like, why are you such a good mood? But to the show's credit and to the character's morals, I suppose, within about 10 seconds, he looks over, sees the body lying there, and feels like absolute shit, and he starts crying. So the show's done a really good job of kind of like them getting caught up in the extreme ideas of the moments, but still feeling human and sort of like coming back out of it. Or there's other moments where you think, oh, maybe they should be desensitized to all this murdering, but they're not. Like, they're still quite new to this. And when they're in that car at the start and Jessica's just killing them, and again, very visceral. The one guy's neck gets slit and his blood sprays all over the car. It's all very visually quite interesting to watch. And this show's pacing has not let up. Even though the episodes are relatively meaty in length. I think this one was longer than the last two, 55 minutes. I don't feel it killing time. I feel like it's using its time very well to build up the characters, keep the story going, and the story does keep moving. Like, I think one of the things that I really appreciate is that the main plot here, that they're looking for evidence to find Utopia, and the chatty older woman at the funeral leads them to the house where they found the comic, and they search the place, and they find a photo of this mental hospital where the comic came from. We find out it came from a patient who gave it to the grandfather who had the comic, who lived at the house. And we find out that the person who was at the hospital is in fact Jessica Hyde's dad. And they all essentially assume then that he must have died because everyone at this hospital died in a fire. All 58 patients, I think the number was, all of them died. And Jessica kind of breaks down and goes in and literally hides in a cupboard under the sink. And they've all get a chance to leave, but then, because there's a lot of moments in the grandfather's house, where the comic was found early on when they're searching, where they really question if they should try and make a run for it. And there's a couple of nice little character beats here that I enjoyed. You have Becky reveals her illness to Ian, and Ian realizes that part of the reason why she's so invested in Utopia is the possibility that there's a cure or a vaccine that's hidden in the comic, kind of like it's had a lot of other things hidden. And she calls herself selfish, that she, even after the death of Sam, she's willing to sort of go along with this crazy person that's very threatening and very dangerous because it might benefit her in the long run. And she sort of reflects on that and says she's a selfish bitch. And Ian says, well, I've discovered I'm a complete coward, so who cares, let's go. And the sweet moment comes, though, afterwards, where he doesn't leave. He comes in after, and he says to Becky, look, even if we're not going to be boyfriend-girlfriend, even if it's not going that way, although I suspect that the bonding here over all these intense situations is going to lead to a more intense relationship between them since they have so much chemistry. But even if that's not what's happening here, she makes him want to be brave. So he's here, deal with it. It's one of those little character beats that I think really makes me like the characters a lot more, especially in this show that has a little bit of a quirkiness to it with the way the reaction still, like how insensitive they were being, or Wilson specifically, how insensitive he was being when he was talking about Jessica's father dying and she's crying in the back seat. To the point where Becky kind of has to tell him to shut up and stop talking about him burning alive. Jessica doesn't believe that he's dead, though. And Becky and Wilson are left at the house that they're living in just now, and basically says that she'll shoot Ian if they leave. And she did the same thing earlier. She threatened to shoot Becky at the funeral if either one of them would get out of the car. Which another moment I really liked is that Wilson, as we know he can do from last episode, because they're both handcuffed in the car, he gets out of the handcuffs, and Ian has to beg him. He begs him to not go, to put the handcuff back on, because he doesn't want Becky to die. And given that this is literally, maybe a couple hours after Sam was shot, maybe it was the night before, actually, so maybe it's maybe 12 hours, I don't know, but it's not been long. Someone being shot in the head in front of you when you've never seen someone be murdered before, it could be a week. It'd still be kind of, they'd still be recovering from it, right? by quite a considerable stretch. So this moment really played, because Wilson does go along with it. He puts the handcuffs back on. He's not happy about it, but he accepts what he's been told. And I should probably mention the opening, which Jessica doesn't want them to be out of her sight. So we have this wonderfully silly image of her peeing with one leg up on the toilet seat, and it's sort of streaming in as she's got the gun on the three of them, as they all look just kind of horrified that they're watching her pee. And it has this, it's quite a funny visual, because she's got like this skirt on, so that it's just coming out of the skirt, the flow, if you will. So no, it starts off with like this quirky moment, which is an interesting start, because it's a really shocking kind of like shift from the end of last episode. It's a very different feeling to that shock ending. So it's really playing around with its tones and bouncing around. So from there, we have Jessica, going to find Artemis using these silly clues about it being Tuesday and about the number and blah blah blah. She finds her with Ian, and finds out that Artemis actually put her father in the mental hospital because she decided that he was dangerous, and Jessica feels betrayed by this, demands to know what else, and we keep hearing Mr. Rabbit, the big bad of Mr. Rabbit, which sounds a lot like Mr. Robot, and I really was having a hard time not hearing it, but Mr. Rabbit's the big bad, and he's the one who really killed her father, but Artemis put him in the hospital. Artemis believes that he's really dead, and that it was probably a good thing that he did die, because it was a dangerous path, and she wanted to protect Jessica. Jessica feels betrayed, and she kind of just tells her everything she knows, and accepting that this means that Jessica's going to kill her because she's a liability, that she's willing to talk so easily without any torture or anything. So we have this fight scene at the end where Ian tries to keep stopping her. He does almost pee on Artemis at first, which is you know, not the best first impression as first impressions go. She has numbers tattooed under her fingernails, which, by the way, anything with fingernails being, ripped off, eye stuff and fingernails. Those are the sore points. Which this show has had both. It's worth mentioning. Now, admittedly, it didn't really show you the eye stuff. I wasn't too bothered by last episode's eye stuff in that way, because it was all kind of off camera. So whatever. The implication of it doesn't bother me that much. But actually seeing stuff touch an eye, I'm like, ugh. No, not for me. But so that sets up kind of next stuff. I mentioned obviously the Arby going to Dr. Christie. Dr. Christie stuff is that his Simpro. I forgot the name of it last episode, but Simpro is shut down by the FBI and the FDC, and they want to test it and all sorts. And they're delighted because Rainn Wilson's character, Stearns, he gets his package, or his sample of the virus from St. Louis, and upon a bit of analysis discovers that it is the virus that he suspected it was. It's the one that he discovered. And when he talks to his wife, it turns out that they actually already have a vaccine. Like, he already made a vaccine for this for people who were in the area. And this could be a cure, this could solve everything. And when he goes to tell his boss, and it leads him to Dr. Christie's office, and he's very delighted to see him at first. Like, oh yes, you're the man behind this, and you've got this all figured out. But Christie wants to fast track it. He wants to just immediately get it in people's hands and start curing things to get him off the hook. And Stearns is noticeably concerned about this and refuses to sign off on it. He wants to go do further testing. He wants to make sure it's safe. All sensible things to want to do as a scientist, absolutely. Especially when we're dealing with a vaccine that's going to be going into human beings. And he's basically just told to go. So he takes it upon himself to go to St. Louis. And he doesn't actually get anywhere. He tries to bluff his way in at the front where all the military are kind of keeping people out. And it doesn't work. He kind of sneaks away. To his credit, he kind of very successfully Batmans out the scene. But it feels convincing because there's such a crowd of people all yelling and shouting that him just sneaking behind a few of them actually feels very convincing. I never thought I'd be seeing Dwight from The Office Batman out of a scene in a convincing manner, but lo and behold, he achieved it. So, yeah, we have that side of thing. It wasn't like... I think that's partly why the ending... Like, John Cusack, even in the last episode, felt a little bit suspicious, let's just say. The whole scene at the table with his family, with the... what did you do to earn your place in this crowded world today, felt kind of villainous to me, even though on its surface level isn't. It felt a little bit, just maybe a bit too good and noble or something. Like, like he's really making up for the fact that he's a complete monster. And so the ending with Arby didn't surprise me, especially as soon as I saw Arby, and it tries to trick you into thinking, because he's pulling out the gun, he's like, oh, is he coming to kill him? And I kind of just got it. Like, I got that they know each other, he's working for him, and that's fine. Which makes it easily the least effective of the endings. But, there are some interesting tidbits in here where he says they have to get Utopia. They know who Jessica Hyde is. Well, and obviously Arby did, but, it makes it very clear that Christie, unless I'm told otherwise, or there's more evidence that suggests otherwise soon, I'm assuming Christie is Mr. Rabbit. All the characters in the story in the comic do seem to correlate to real people. And he does own a bio company. He's definitely got an interest in viruses, even if that's not necessarily what he's doing. Although, I do wonder if there's something in the Simpro that's making people vulnerable to the virus, and Utopia's got like the signs of everything he's going to do because he made Jessica's dad make all these viruses and engineer them all and all these things. There's a lot of questions there, but it definitely seems like he's got some very nefarious plan. And given that he keeps saying, like, what did you do to earn your place in this crowded world? I mean, my instinct would tell me that he just wants to thin the population. He's basically trying to be a Thanos. He's trying to he's like, too many people, not enough resources. We have to thin out the herd, and this is his way of trying to do so in some capacity. How much he wants to thin it out is maybe a question for later, but that would definitely be my instinct at this point. But that stuff's it's interesting. It's interesting stuff. So I mentioned obviously Wilson and Becky were still back at the house. They were left behind, and they have the laptop. They're waiting for Grant. Grant does get to them, does respond to them, and sort of speaks in code. So they have to work out the code a little bit, but they kind of figure out it's next to the library in the city. And Grant, we see him. He has a little human moment, which was really nice because he kind of debates with this foster mother character, who basically gives him a key and says, "You're welcome to come back here. You're going to see friends today. Fine. I'm going to respect that that's what you're doing, but you're welcome here. You can come back. Here's a key. All I ask is that we can trust you." And he does actually go to take Alice's laptop because he needs one. And on his way out, there's a bag with his name on it, and it's just got the blackberries in it, and he's all excited. And he sort of stops and he eats one, and there's this moment of contemplation, and we see him put the laptop back. So there's just this little human moment to make you like him a little bit, because you get the idea that he is this this kid who's in a rough life, who provides for himself mostly, who's very sly, who has to work outside the system. But this is showing that he has some humanity, and even spending like a day or whatever it's been with Alice and this woman, who at first he makes fun of her because he says that just because someone needs help doesn't mean they're worth helping, and the woman says, "I disagree with that," basically. And when he's on his own, he's like, "Well, I disagree with that." He's kind of making fun of her, but he's been challenged with a world view that is far more positive, and I think while he tries to fight it, he ultimately does something very nice before he leaves. I mean, okay, choosing not to do the bad thing, maybe you could say it isn't very nice, but given that he would have been willing to just take it before, a small act of kindness on the part of Alice completely changed his direction here. So, and we have these characters, and it's one of the things, obviously, Jessica shooting one of our likable characters in the head last episode, and it's something that's emerges slightly in this one, where Ian kind of sticks up to her when he says he wants to go pee with, because he's like, "Oh, I want to go pee." He's like, "Well, you pee near me." And he's like, "No, I'm not. You shot my friend in the face. You've been doing all this stuff to us. You're in constant danger. You know what? I'm going to go do something in privacy because, god damn it, I have to." And it feels like he is getting a little bit more brave. He's willing to stand up for himself, even if it just means he gets to pee with with no one like right next to him. Which is a humble, noble goal if there ever was one. Privacy while peeing. I think we all cherish that at least a little bit. So where is it going? Where is it going? So yeah, back to Wilson and Becky, who have to figure out, and they get there. I did laugh. There wasn't as many funny moments in this episode for me, but I did laugh at Wilson yelling out, "I'm visually impaired," when Becky leaves him the wheel because they're stuck in traffic and Becky has to run and get Grant. Who is just about to be not arrested, but the police officer notices he's been standing around on his own. He's a young kid, and he won't let him go. He's like, "Come with me. We're going to have a chat. We're going to find out where you belong." And Becky runs into the scene saying, "Grant," and then Grant turns around and goes, "Mom," without any time to even trying to explain to the officer the difference in race or anything like that. Just sort of just go with it. Just act confident, and it'll sell. Whatever. And it's a really sweet moment. I found myself surprisingly into this scene because Grant essentially just been picked up and taken out off the board almost immediately, just because don't get me wrong, he looks like maybe he does need help, and the officer's not completely in the wrong for trying to intervene. But you obviously don't want him to, right? You want him to meet up with the characters, and this moment where without ever actually having met and only just realizing that he's a kid. Becky comes in and they click immediately into this like lie together. And as soon as they get around the corner, there's a moment where he hugs her because he's so happy to see her and so happy that he got saved from going back into the system. That says a lot about his character, and combine that with the act of kindness from earlier, and all of a sudden Grant feels like he's one of the likable characters. Because before he was this kind of loner who we didn't really get a sense of. I feel like after this episode, there's enough of a spark there to start to feel like, okay, I kind of like this kid too. And so much of this show, because Jessica's this character, like, I have to imagine that maybe the arc, or maybe part of her arc, has to be her learning that some of the things she has done are wrong, and that this is someone who was raised in a really particular, strange way outside of the system, and Grant's someone who maybe not as strange, but definitely was is kind of existing in a way that's outside of a normal family life or a normal loving environment, say. And he's learning kind of acts of kindness. He's learning empathy. He's learning these things, and it seems like something that Jessica never learned. And I do wonder if we get a moment at some point where maybe she does apologize, or maybe she feels the remorse or the guilt of what she has done to at least Sam, if not other people. And that could be a fascinating thing if they actually try and pull that off, and they actually try to have her go through this change where, can the characters forgive her? Can we as the audience forgive her for what she did? And not that she's there yet, but because she's being challenged, the reason why I'm thinking it might go down this path is because Ian challenges her, and she's almost like taken aback that he's willing to fight her on this much. She doesn't even, she just sort of stands there and kind of almost not quite shocked, but just a little bewildered. And I wonder if, like, analyzing why someone's willing to stand up against her, and the way they look out for each other, eventually results in some sort of growth. It results in some sort of empathy that she learns. So that could be really interesting. And it's exciting. It's exciting that I care about the characters' arcs, even the character who, I don't like Jessica right now. And she's hard to like because she doesn't have a whole lot of likable qualities. She's intentionally erratic. And you have that moment where she's upset when she thinks her dad's dead. And you get the sense that mentally she is kind of a child. I mean, she's very smart and very capable. And she's very skilled in fighting, obviously, but in a lot of ways she's not matured. In a lot of ways she does just think in the bluntness of a child. And I think there's almost, I'm almost fascinated to see when we have the whole group together again and Grant's there with, like, sort of analysing just maybe how much more mature Grant might be compared to her, or how similar they think about certain things in some ways, or how, I don't know, like there's definitely points of comparison there that I think could be very fascinating. So, and I'm surprised I've actually went this long in this episode. I wasn't intending or thinking that I would, just because I didn't think it was as dense with, like, super fascinating stuff. But there's actually quite a lot of character tidbits in here to kind of sink our teeth on. But is there anything else I would like to discuss? I liked, when I said they got sad about Sam's body, they covered her up a little bit. She's still lying there in the middle of the floor, and I'll be interested to see where we go, again, with more of, like, the aftermath of that, because it is here in this episode, but because Jessica's not interested in dealing with it, everyone else is kind of forced not to, for the most part. Obviously, yeah, there's a little bit when they're together, left alone with her, but ultimately they have something to do. They have to, like, find out where they need to go by 8 p.m, so they're kind of time constrained, and they're trying to solve that. So, but once again, like, I think the mysteries are okay. Like, I wasn't super into the Artemis stuff. I do like the idea of the father being in this mental hospital that burned down. I like some of the backstory that's starting to come out. And I like that we can have, like, names like Mr. Rabbit for the villain. I'm assuming that I'm right in thinking that he's Christian. If he isn't, I mean, don't tell me. I mean, if this is something from the original show, I'll find out over the course of this version's exposition and the way it tells its story. But I like those elements, but not all the mystery beats necessarily are the strongest parts of the show. What's really strong about this show is the characters, the style, the dialogue between the characters that makes them feel natural and but witty at the same time. All that stuff is really good. And even the villains, even something as simple as the two ginger assassins and their little brief moment, there's just a quirkiness to some of that that's really good. Also, Wilson still doesn't know his family's dead. We should mention that. The other characters kind of hiding from him, and they're sort of insisting that he shouldn't email his family. It's too dangerous, and we see Becky later on searching to see what the cover story is, and it says it's a gas leak, which probably ties into what they were using to kill them, right? Because they did make them breathe stuff, so it makes sense that cover story might actually hold. They've been quite forward thinking in that. So yeah, no, episode 3 is good. Episode 3 is good. It's not, I don't like it as much as 1 and 2, but that's okay because I had a really high opinion of 1 and 2. And I'm definitely down. Like, these characters, these moments between Ian and Becky are really good. Her first meeting with Grant's great. Everything with Wilson is usually pretty entertaining. And I think what's impressive about Ian is I think Ian could very easily be the character who's the most annoying or the most like just hard to swallow or hard not hard to swallow. That's not the right phrase, but hard to take because even though he's right, he does kind of come across as, or he could come across as whiny. But I think they walk this fine line with them where you can everything he's saying and everything he's feeling is completely understandable, and it makes him more real. It makes him more like a real human being because he's reacting in this way and he's questioning all these other things. So when he does, get brave and do something else, or he does stick up to Jessica, it means more, and you kind of like him more in that moment because he's coming out of that a little bit. So yeah, that's episode 3 of Utopia. I'll be back soon with episode 4. Let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. No doubt I missed some stuff, so feel free to fill in any gaps in the comments. Liking super important on YouTube. It lets the algorithm know that we're worth finding, so please do hit the like button. It is the easy and free way to support everything we do. You can also, of course, get us on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to support us with some monies for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your trouble. Otherwise, get us on Twitter @mail_fuzz. Did I say that already? I don't know. I can't remember. These outros go on so long. I never remember. But that's me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?